Hello, hello. This must be a live mic. And you must be at the Bohemian National Hall, and it's wonderful to see all of you here. Yeah, Bohemian National Hall. And this is just a great occasion. I'm wearing all of my hats tonight. I really am. So I'm just going to go through it. I'm lecturer in Czech language at Columbia University, and that's important because two of my students provided part of the text for this evening, and you'll get a chance to interview them after the performance. I'm the co-director of the East Central European Center at the Harriman Institute, and those institutions are material and informational sponsors of this event, so thank you to the Harriman Institute for their support. And I'm also here in my capacity as president of the Czechoslovak Society of Arts and Sciences, New York chapter, SVUNY. Yay! And we are also a co-sponsor of this event, and we are proudly supported by the BBLA, the Bohemian Benevolent and Literary Association, which is the umbrella group that supports several organizations that operate out of this building. And if you haven't heard, I'm here to brag on behalf of the BBLA that the BBLA just recently received the Gratias Agit Award, which is an award that the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs gives out to a few select individuals and organizations every year for outstanding work spreading the good name of the Czech Republic abroad. So, BBLA. And this, of course, this evening is a really exciting collaboration between my organizations and the Václav Havel Library Foundation, which is another BBLA-supported organization. And this is part of the Rehearsal for Truth Theater Festival, the main part of which, as most of you know, takes place in the spring, but which we're doing a special spin-off here in the fall. And this is a project that I started talking about with last spring with the artistic director of the Rehearsal for Truth Theater Festival, who really did almost all of the work for this event, and to whom I'm about to turn the mic over. And that is Mr. Edward Einhorn, who is also the director of Untitled Theater Company number 61, which has done a lot of great work over the years, but probably none, to my mind, more memorable than the Havel Festival, when they put on every single play by Václav Havel when Havel was here in New York as an artist in residence back at my institution, Columbia University. And so please welcome Edward, who's going to tell you a little about what you're about to see, this kind of composite performance.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris, for everything that you did to put this together, and also for going through all the crediting, which is quite complex. So what we're going to watch is 4 versions of the same scene from a play, sometimes called the Memo, sometimes called the Memorandum, also called Notification, depends on your translation. But it is one of Havel's better-known plays, and the sections that we're going to look at are looking at the language that he invented for the play. So it seemed particularly appropriate to, in a stage reading, looking at language, to look at Havel's made-up language of, and once again, you're going to hear this in many different versions, but I'm going to say pataidapi right now. So because each translator has come up with their own version of this translation, and with that, they've also come up with their own version of the pronunciation of the word pataidapi, which has driven our actors insane. So you'll notice that among many variations in the scene. We also start off with scene 2 because it is the scene where pataidapi is really introduced. And so the professor character which is also has various names in depending on the translation. But the professor character is introducing Ptah to his class for the first time in that first scene, and the students are listening. You'll notice in the later scenes the students are not there. That is because they have all given up except for one. And you'll also notice a mysterious figure crossing the stage in each of these scenes. That is the actual protagonist of the play. That is his name is Gross, or her name is Gross, depending. But the Gross is involved in getting a memo in Ptah, trying to translate it. And he first encounters this room as a former conference room that's been transformed into a classroom, and then he is consistently forced to walk through it again and again throughout the play, and so that's what you're seeing when that happens. The whole of the piece is about the ascent and descent and sort of ascent again of Gross, and Ptah is being used as a methodology for power. And so there's this invented language that his underlings have created in order to oust him out of his position of power. So that is the whole motivation behind this new language. The professor, however, is more of a true believer, and he is very enthusiastic about about this new language, and for reasons that I'll explain. And interestingly, the whole thing came from Havel's brother, Ivan, having a mathematical background and thinking about what could be a perfect mathematical language. And so that is how he arrived at the language as articulated in the play. So that's the basic setup of it all. I will watch the scenes, then we're going to have a talk with the translators, maybe also the actors. One of the translators is living in that computer right now, Paul Wilson. He's in Canada, and so he will join us via Zoom as well. And you may notice on the back of your program, there is a list of all the various ways Ptah has been translated by various translators, including Vera Blackwell, who is not represented here, but was the original translation into a sort of British English. Paul wrote his translation for the Havel Festival that we did in 2006. One last thing, as long as there's a totally different thing, but I'm going to mention it so I don't forget. There is going to be, for the Václav Havel Library Foundation, a gala coming up. There's information about it, and if anyone's interested in attending that gala, we would love to have you for it. So I just didn't want to forget mentioning it. Okay, so now back to our play and our project, and I'm going to hand it over to the actors for, in this case, the memo.
Ptah, as you know, is a synthetic language constructed on strictly scientific principles. It has a highly rational grammar and an extraordinarily broad vocabulary. It is an utterly exact language, capable with far more precision than any other current living language, of expressing all the subtle formulaic nuances of important official communications. Now, one consequence of this precision, however, is that Ptah is exceptionally complex and difficult. Many months of intensive work lie before you, work that will be crowned with success only if you rely on dedicated effort, determination, discipline, talent, and memory. Above all, you must believe. No one has ever yet learned ptytopy without an unshakable belief in ptytopy itself. And now briefly to some of the basic principles of ptytopy. As we know, natural languages arose spontaneously, instinctively, unscientifically, as it were, and thus their structure betrays a certain amateurism. In terms of official communication, the most serious shortcoming of natural languages is their unreliability, resulting from a high level of ambiguity and permutability in their basic units of construction. Words. You all know how, in natural languages, it is often enough to alter a single letter in a word, as in brain, braid, or tool, fool, or to remove a single letter, as in loaf, oaf, to change the entire meaning of the word. And this is not to mention homonyms. I mean, think of the potential embarrassment that can arise in the course of office interaction when two words of different meanings but identical pronunciation are confused. Duel, duel. Steal, steal. Profit, profit. By deliberately limiting the mutual similarities between words, ptytopy can guarantee that every official communication will achieve a degree of precision, reliability, and clarity that is simply unattainable in any natural language. It operates on the following principle. If words are to resemble each other as little as possible, they must be formed from the least probable combination of letters. This means that the creation of words must be derived from the kind of principles that lead to the greatest possible linguistic superfluity. Because superfluity, which is the difference between maximum and genuine entropy as it relates to optimum entropy and expressed in percentages, achieves precisely that degree of excess by which the expression of certain information in the given language, in this case ptytopy, is longer, thus making it probable that its equivalent would be in a language with maximum entropy in which all the letters occur with the same probability. To put it briefly, the greater superfluity a language possesses, the more reliable it is. For it reduces the danger that by confusing one letter for another, or overlooking something, or through a typographical error, the meaning of the text will be altered. Now, how does ptytopy achieve such a high degree of superfluity? Very simply, by the consistent application of the so-called principle of 60% dissimilarity. This means that any word in ptytopy must differ by 60% of its letter content from any other word in ptytopy of the same length. At the same time, any segment of that word must differ from any ptytopy word of the same length, i.e., any word that is shorter than that of which it is a part. Thus, for example, of all the 5-letter combinations of the 26 letters of the alphabet, of which there are a total of 11,881,376 permutations, one can find 432 combinations that mutually differ by at least 3 letters. That is, by 60%. Of those 432 combinations, 17 meet the other requirements and thus may be used as ptytopy words. Now, from that, it is also clear why in ptytopy text, you often encounter words that are very long.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Can you tell us what the longest ptytopy word is?
It's the word for fruit fly, and it has 319 letters. But to continue. How does ptytopy solve the problem of readability and pronounceability in such long words? Very simply. Here and there within the word, the letters are separated by spaces, so that the word is then created by a certain number of so-called subwords of varying length. But, like everything in ptytopy, the length is not left to chance. The vocabulary of ptytopy is structured according to an entirely logical principle. The more general the meaning, the shorter the word. So, for example, the most general concept we have, the one expressed by the word whatever, is rendered in ptytopy by the saying That is, by a word that has only 2 letters. Of course, there are even shorter words, for example, but for the time being, that word has no meaning. Can anyone tell me why? Well, all right, Ms. Carlos.
I think it's kept in reserve for the possibility that science will one day discover a notion even more general than whatever.
Well done, Ms. Carlos. Top marks. And presently, I shall enumerate, purely for your initial orientation, a few of the most commonplace Tedeppian interjections. Now then, no is zukibaj. Our nope is bikur. No way is haif dai doritob. No how is balipak juz. The interjection of surprise, well, is zik. Our well, is not zik, as some pupils erroneously tell me, but zigzim. Well, I never. Is valiaguf ib de solas, or also sometimes, of course, more infrequently, boribaf. Bam! To symbolize a gunshot or some kind of blow, is hetidix ujhobi. But bam, in the sense of a colloquial expression for astonishment, is maluz rog. Yikes is hatu.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Would you be able to tell us how to say Jesus in Taidepi?
Mikkel.
Thank you.
Whoops is setidup. Woof is vamo. The poetic O in Tiedepi is hruligip. Whoa is translated primarily as limmer, although I would prefer the expression mrib uputra. In Tiedepi, our vital whoa there is fernico yefer dabux altep dai savarub gos terexis. And now, for a brief memory check. Well, I never. Carlos?
Varilaguf ib de sol?
Yikes. Carlos?
Hatum.
Whoops. Carlos?
Setudak.
Bam.
Symbolizing a gunshot.
No, in the sense of a colloquial expression for astonishment. Carlos?
Maluz rog.
Maluz.
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 Now listen carefully. Maluz.
Maluz.
You're quite poor at that pronunciation. How do you say well?
Zik.
And well.
Zik.
Zigzim.
Apologies, I forgot.
Ivan, Jesus wept.
Please, we haven't discussed that one yet.
Don't make excuses, you simply don't know it. Whoa there!
Vernigiko yafir dabux altep daisavareb gop terexis.
Wrong again. Gos terexis.
I meant dos terexis.
But it's such a vital term. No, Carlos. We won't come to an understanding this way. I put so much faith in you, and you have done what? Well, disappointed me. Yes, disappointed. No, you suppose this could go on this way? Well, no, it couldn't. Assuredly not. This would ultimately get us where? Well, answer me.
I don't know.
Exert yourself.
The middle of nowhere.
No.
The 12th of never?
No.
Up the creek without a paddle.
But of course I'm the king without a paddle! No, we can't continue our studies under these circumstances. It would only hinder the instruction and delay the others. Please vacate the classroom. Proceeding with our exegesis, ugh is trevunt. We translate, good grief, as Kavlix ubahaj kaput. Really? Is hofro gaborte. We translate, as per my previous email, as
Statement to affirm an accusation to deny. If you don't find out what it means, how can you fashion a reply? If you don't get someone to translate it, you cannot even try. You can't get anyone to help you, not even your employee situation.
And now, we will enumerate purely as a first pass some of the most common petit depian interjections. Starting off, our ah! It said Zuki Baj, our oh. It said Bikur, our oh. It said Haif Dai Doretov, our oh my. It said Bolipak Juz. The interjection of exasperation, oi, is said Zik. The more expressive oui, is not Zik, 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 as some students incorrectly tell me, but instead Zik, Zik, Zim.
Yeah.
Oy vey. Is very lagof ibda solas, or also sometimes, albeit less commonly, boribaf. Bam! Like the sound of a blow or other such impact is hetidex ujhobi, but bam, as the conversational expression of suddenness, is malus rog. Hey is said hatum.
excuse me,
Yes.
might you tell us how to say whoopsie daisy in T to pay?
Mikkel.
Thank you.
Psst is said setu dap, is said vamel. In petit to pay, the poetic o is rulagip. Ul is translated by most as limmer, but I would suggest the phrase marib yuputir. In petit to pay, our all-important hooray becomes frinigiko yefer dabux altep de savarab goes terexis. And now, a small comprehension check. Oy vey. Carlos.
Varia guf ib de solas.
Hey. Carlos.
Hatum.
Psst. Carlos.
Setadup.
Bam!
Like the sound of a blow or other impact?
No, it's in the conversational expression of suddenness. Carlos.
Malus rogue.
Malos.
Malus.
Malos.
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 Listen carefully. Malos.
Malos.
You're terrible at pronunciation. How do you say oi?
Zik.
And oi, oi, oi?
Zig, zig, nim.
Zig, zig, zim.
Right.
Ivan, gosh.
We haven't, excuse me, we haven't covered that.
Don't make excuses, you simply don't know it. Hooray!
Firniko yefer dabux altep dai zavarut gopterexis.
Terrible again, gozterexes.
I meant gopterexis.
Such an important word. No. No, Carlos, like that, we wouldn't understand each other. I've invested so much hope in you, and what have you done? You failed me. Yes. You failed me. No. No, how would that be? It wouldn't work. Of course not. I mean, any more of that, and where would we end up? Answer me.
I don't know.
Try harder.
Kindergarten?
No.
A standstill?
No.
A train wreck?
Why, of course. A train wreck. No, under these conditions, we cannot keep studying. You would simply put the brakes on my instruction and hold back the others. Please leave my classroom. We'll continue with the presentation. Yo, c'est très bon. See, we would translate as Kavlis ubahaj kupit. Hey is hofro gaborte. A few we would translate as...
That exhibit looks suspicious. Your position might be getting undermined. It seems a program has been set up and specifically designed. Your crafty deputy appears to be the program's mastermind. Perhaps you haven't been so careful with the papers you signed. What does this thing mean?
And now I will list, just for the first orientation, some of the most common Tidepe interjections. So, our ach is zukibaj. Our ow is pikur. Our o is haif dai doritop. Our ve is bolipak Jews. The expression for wonder, yeah, is zik. But our yeah is not zik, as some of my students wrongly say, but zik, zim. Yemene is valyaguf ip the solas. Or, sometimes, but which is more rare, boribaf. Puff, as a sign for a gunshot or something close to that sound, is hetadix ochobi. Puff, as a common expression of wonder, is malus rog. Oi is hatum.
Please,
Yes?
could you tell us how to say in Petidape the word oh?
Miko.
Thank you.
Is setudat. Is vimmel. The O in the poetic sense is hrulugip. Who is translated as limmer. Although I would prefer mrib uputr. Our important hurrah is in Tidepe fringo yefur da books altip dai zavorub gos teraxis. And now for little test of memory. Yamine. Carlos?
Varila guf ibdes solas?
Oi. Carlos?
Hatum?
Carlos?
Set to dap.
Puff? Carlos?
As a sign of a gunshot?
No, it's a common expression for wonder. Carlos?
Malus rog.
Malus.
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 Molas.
Molas.
Listen carefully. Mulos.
Mulaus.
Your pronunciation isn't much. How do we say yet?
Zik.
And yeah?
Zik zik.
Zigzim.
Sorry, I forgot.
Ivan, hopsa.
Please, we haven't covered that one yet.
Don't make excuses, you just don't know. Hurrah!
Fernigiko yefer da books al teptai savarab gob torexis.
Wrong again. Gostarexis.
Gos torexis.
It's such an important word. No, Carlos. We won't be friends like that. And I had such high hopes for you, and you did what? You disappointed me. Yes, disappointed. No, like that, it just won't what? It won't work. Surely not. Soon, what will we have here? Please answer me.
I don't know.
Just think.
Kindergarten.
No.
A reformatory.
No.
Pigeon house.
Well, of course. No, under these circumstances, we can't continue our study. You would just slow down the others. Please leave the classroom. And now I shall continue in my lecture. Allo is trevunt. Vida is translated as Kavils ubahas kupit. Hele is hofrogaborte. Oof is translated as
and now I'll mention, just to get you oriented, some of the most common pataidopi interjections. For example, our is zukibash in pataidopi. Our ow is bikur. O is haif daidoratab. Wow is bolipak joz. The expression of mild surprise, my, is zik. But the slightly more emphatic my is not zik, as some students erroneously believe, but zik, zim. Holy smokes is varilaguf ib de sola. So whoopee, as in to express excitement, is hetidex uchhoba, but whoopee, meaning possibly as a sexual act, as in making whoopee is Muller's rog. Oy vey is hatum.
Sir?
Yes.
Can you tell me how to say oopsie daisy in pataidopi?
Mickle.
Thank you.
Psst is katudap. Is vimmel. Oh, is hrulagip and whew is usually translated as limmer, but I prefer to use the expression merib Jupiter. Now, our very important word, hooray, is frenigiko yefer dabbooks altav dai savarab goz terexis. And now, a brief test of your memory. Holy smokes. Uma. Miss Carlos.
Vrayalaguf ib de solas.
Oy vey. Miss Carlos.
Hatem.
Psst. Miss Carlos.
Katudap.
Whoopee.
To signify excitement?
No. As in making whoopee. Miss Carlos.
Maluz rug.
Malos.
Malos.
Malos. Malos. Malos. Your pronunciation is going to the dogs. Carlos. How do you say my?
Zik.
And my?
Zik zik.
Zik zim.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Uma. How about oh my god?
I'm sorry, but we haven't gotten that far
That's
yet.
no excuse. The fact is you don't know. Hooray?
Furnico, Yefer, Debux, Altep, Di Severa, Gopterexes.
Wrong again, Gausterexes.
I meant Gopterexes.
Such an important little word. No, Miss Carlos. That is not the way to get ahead here. I've invested so much hope in you, and you turn around and what? Well, you've disappointed me. Yes, indeed, you've disappointed me, and no, we certainly can't. What? Well, it'll go on this way. No, indeed, we certainly can't, because before you know it, you'd turn this place into a what? Well, come on, answer.
I don't know.
Go on, try.
A nursery school?
No,
A kindergarten?
no,
A crazy house?
that's more like it. A crazy house. No, Miss Carlos. Under these circumstances, you cannot continue in this course. You'll only slow things down and hold back the others. I'm going to have to ask you to leave this class. Let us continue. Hello, is said as Trevont. You see, his Kavaliz Ubahaj Kupit. Look, as Havrogaborte, and Eek is rendered as.
There's a memorandum written in a language you don't understand. It's an official memorandum for the office you command. It's on your desk. Where did it come from? You don't recognize the hand. Is it benign, an accident, or something adversaries plan? You don't know what the memo says or what its language might imply. Is it a statement to affirm, an accusation to deny? If you don't find out what it means, how can you fashion a reply? If you don't get someone to translate it, you cannot even try.
Testing test.
Oh, you got a live one?
I got one, yeah.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
All right, so I'd like you to welcome to the stage, in addition to our actors and Edward, my two students, Jennifer Helinek and Lucas Schlesinger. And sitting in between them, the author of the third translation of Scene 8 is the winner of this year's prize for writing the best short play, inspired partly by Vaclav Havel. And this is Josef Nosal, who is a graduate student at the School for Performing Arts in Brno. And please welcome on the big screen, all the way from Ontario, Canada, the greatest living translator of Czech literature into English, Mr. Paul Wilson. And yeah, so I want to have a great conversation here about translating and performing theater and translation, and hear both from our translators and from our actors about what was hard and what was rewarding and what was unexpected. But I want to just start by framing a little bit what some of the extraordinary difficulties were with this task that I saddled my students with first week of the semester. As you gather, this sequence is about an artificial language, and the task that is really pinpointed in scene 8 is the translation of interjections. And if you've thought about it, and maybe you haven't, but maybe as you watch these scenes unfold, it starts to occur to you that interjections are some of the least specific and referential words we have, which makes them among the most difficult to translate, especially difficult to translate within the alleged goals and principles of Taidapi, the artificial language, which seeks to eliminate all possible ambiguity. And in fact, there are 4 scenes in the play that involve the instructor of the artificial language. And the scene in between the ones that you saw, in that scene, the instructor is actually explaining multiple translations of a single term, the expression baf, which is like boo in Czech, and giving all the different context. And so we already realize from that scene that it's kind of a fool's errand to come up with a single word that's going to be a fully adequate translation of a word like oh or ow or what have you. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask our translators, how did you approach this? If there was no single word that was going to be a good translation into English or not into English from the Czech, what guided you in your choices? And we'll start with Jennifer.
Funguje to? Okay. So, hello everybody. I think I was always hyper aware of the wonderfully artificial context of this night when I was translating, that we would have the scenes separated from the rest of the context of the play, and also that you would have to listen to the same scene 4 blessed times. So I chose interjections initially that were quite out there, and I was also influenced by the fact that I was an EFL teacher, an English as a foreign language teacher for several years, including in the Czech Republic. And I was thinking back to moments, for example, when I had to teach a unit on complaints, because really that's why humans invented language in the first place, is so we could complain. So when you're standing in front of a room and there's this inherent theatricality to a classroom in this way, and you're saying, repeat after me, it drives me up the wall, or it gets my goat. I mean, this is an absurdist play, but I think there are absurdist undertones to all language learning situations. So I was thinking about that and how this is a wonderful tour in the original Czech of so many different Czech interjections. And I wanted mine to feel that way, but to have some room for creativity because of this night. So I put you through it with some of my early drafts. I was saying, get out of town was in there, heavens to Betsy, Christ on a bike, all these things were in there. So my strategy was to start in the deep end and then be towed back into the shallow waters of sanity, I would say. In your own very mild-mannered and supportive way, your comments were becoming increasingly desperate. So I made my interjections ultimately much closer to the syllables of what Havel did, and I was thinking more granularly in terms of the groupings of the interjections. So I think we got to an interesting place.
Thank you. Lucas? Yeah. Would you like to weigh in on what was steering you through this?
I would say that for me it was sort of the opposite process, that if you were pulling Jennifer back into the shallow end, that you were the parent out in the middle of the ice and I was the kid hanging onto the edge and kind of being enticed to sort of come out and be a little bit more adventurous. But I would say that I also sort of quickly realized this sort of untranslatability of Czech interjections, like somewhere in my notebook is written, this means this, and then it also means this, and then it also means this different thing, and that would be sort of impossible. And so instead I also sort of tried to go for was this like phonetic relation between the interjections and what would make them funny, and to try to, as much as I could, choose ones that the actors could go in a lot of different directions with. So like, hey actually appears in there twice as a sort of way to give different ways of kind of going after it, which happened.
Indeed. Thank you. Now, Josef, your rendering was perhaps the most unconventional in that you left most of those interjections in the original Czech. Explain your thinking to us.
I think I'm gonna be more straightforward with this because I am more straightforward man. So I just think these interjections in Czech language are pretty unique, and I wanted to stay that way because when I tried to translate them, it became much larger words, and then the petit depe translation, which is far longer than the original interjections, it wouldn't be that absurd if I made these original Czech interjections longer. So I decided to made it, like, not to change it at all. Sorry for my English.
Thank you. And I remember when I heard about that choice, when I read it, I was kind of scratching my head, wondering how it would work. And I'm so impressed at what our director and actors did to make it work. It really was a viable alternative. And Paul, I wonder if you can go back. It's been a few years since you produced that translation. If you can recall what you were thinking about, and whether the particular context in which you were working on that translation for the Havel Festival had anything to do with the way you approached the text. Hold on just a sec.
Can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so this was the translation that I made. It was in conjunction with Edward's theater, and he phoned me up at one point during the translation and said that he had more female actors than he could. He wanted to give more parts to female actors, and would Carlos, if Carlos were a woman, would that make a difference? Because in the original, he's a man, and so I consulted with Havel, and Havel, was completely easy with the idea. But then I began to realize that in this context, there could be a subtext of someone, of the instructor, falling in love with, or at least flirting with, his student. And so the words that I chose, some of the words that I chose were words that were loaded with, or could be loaded with sexual innuendo. And so I think in general, when answering the question about translating these sort of wishy-washy words that have no specific meaning, the context in which they are spoken and who's speaking is really important.
Thank you. Well, and I think that's a great segue for us to bring the actors and the director into the conversation, because that's what I kind of suspected, in which I saw kind of forming. I saw forming before my eyes in the rehearsal was just how much variation there could be, and primarily in this relationship between student and pupil. And so I wanted to ask the actors and Edward to chime in if you'd like to. What was it that kind of drove the very specific dynamics between student and teacher in the different versions? Were you reacting to particular things in the translation, or was it more of sort of a choice, okay, here's going to be the flirty one, and here's going to be the sadistic teacher, and so on?
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like you were in the middle.
I and still am.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thomas Shuman.
Sir.
not a knight. To be clear.
And you can just leave your your thing.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't something we wanted to impose. We wanted to provide variety for you lovely people. But when you're given such wonderfully loaded language or such colloquialisms or even like the base check to work off of, like it just the way it comes out of your mouth and the way that it's reacted to by your other actors, it sort of kind of has a mind of its own. And you're just kind of bringing it to life as honestly as you can, which is kind of fun.
Sounds good. It was fairly organic process in your view.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to comment on
I
that?
just want to make a public apology to Lucas for, that was not his unique translation of Zig Zig. Zig Zig, I screwed that up as you probably know.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Oleson.
You handled that very well.
I did my best.
So, I mean, it's doing the different translations, because you're doing multiple scenes, the same scene again and again, wanted to get some variety in there. But I think with all the translations, there'll be multiple ways of playing the role. So I asked the translators what their notion of the character, of that particular character, was. Josef said he was strict, very strict. So I went with that, and Jennifer wanted. I think you also detect in the language that he's kind of a pompous ass. Is what her translation is infuses into the character. So that's what I was trying to go for, which perhaps comes naturally.
We all have our strong suits. Thank you. Our third actor?
Yeah, I think actually with the scenes I was just in the Paul Wilson ones.
Yeah.
Edward sort of like came in ready with like, yeah, this is flirty. So I think I'm weird with the mic. Okay. I think for me, that one was more like a top down of like, great, I've got something to start with, and we just kind of kept pushing that direction. And then I was walking in the middle. That was a bit more organic, like the Thomas was playing with the pointer, and that happened in rehearsal, and I was scared of that, and that was my genuine reaction. So that for me, the physicality of those middle scenes were more spontaneous to this group and this performance. But I think the sort of motivations for the Paul Wilson stuff were more sort of handed to me, and I was asked to run with it. Yeah.
Well run. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie Litchfield. Edward, would you like to chime in with sort of your bird's eye view as director of the show?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I've worked on Paul's translation before, so I had a very clear idea of where it came from. Though I have to say, your version of this is very different than the one we did in 2006, and that was great. You started playing with it, and I was like, let's run with what the two of you are doing, because it was flirty in both ways, but that meant something totally different to the other actors, and so that was great. That was really fun as well. For Josef, I had prepped the PowerPoint, so I had some idea because Josef sent it to me and explained it to me, and then I was like, what do we do to make sure everybody's following what's going on? And so I came up with the idea of the emojis and that whole thing. And then there was that became a whole odd little translation exercise in itself, where I had to decide, with a limited number of emoji characters I could actually use, how close I could get to the meaning, and how much it mattered whether I was close or whether I was going to hit the meaning or the structure or whatever. Anyway. But the other ones I was deliberately trying to let the words guide, And of course, having the free feedback from the translators while we were doing the read-through was really helpful because, yes, we wanted to distinguish it as much as possible, but we also wanted to bring through the visions of the translators. And my friend Stepan Šimek, who also did some translation for the Havel Festival, was talking about how being a translator is connected to being a director, because it's the first level of direction is how those lines are translated, and what the translator decides the characters are becomes creates an imprint on the play to begin with.
Thank you. They are all translators, everyone you see here. Well, I'd like to open up to the audience, because we are an ample audience, and I know there are people here with connections to theater, with connections to literature, and you may have better questions than I do. Yes, I see one right here.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful and fascinating evening. I wanted to ask maybe all of the translators, is there anything lost in translation from Czech to translating into English? Is there some kind of play on words that goes on between Czech and the created language?
Good question. Anyone like to dive in? Particular things to Czech and the relationship between Czech and DDP?
I think often the issue with translation was when something was very particular or a little bit purposely awkward in the Czech. So I was reading the Vera Blackwell translation earlier today as well, and I went to see what she did with that bit near the very end where the teacher is saying, this would get us where? This would lead to what? And I found all of our translations a little bit awkward, and then I also found Vera Blackwell's translation of that quite awkward, because it's not totally intuitive in the Czech either.
Havel's text is awkward. It's an awkward moment. It's this kind of weird leading question. Yeah. Other thoughts from our translators?
There's just so much going on in the Czech interjections that no English word can really capture. Like we were talking about in class today, we were talking about the Czech phrase, no, yo no, and how it kind of means anything. And I think a lot of the words are sort of like that. Like they have just this range of emotion behind them that English words often don't really capture. And I think that the comedy that we sort of have doesn't capture that really very well.
It's always an approximation. A question here I saw.
So I thought we saw just spectacular display, not just of the translator's art in finding ways in communicating the meaning. Sorry, I'm very in color right now for some reason. In communicating what the playwright has to say, but also the widely different choices that actors and directors can make. And I'm curious for the translators, the extent to which you think about that, right? Because who you cast has an impact on the dramatic storytelling. The choices the actors make, the choices the directors make, all of this changes the story that's presented. So how do you, as translators, think about that or deal with that? Do you think about when do I need to give specific guidance? When do I need to leave room for the other artists to make their choices? I'd be curious to hear your process around that.
Any translators want to talk about whether they were thinking ahead to the role of the directors and the actors in this? Maybe our theater professional here?
Well, as I said, I'm straightforward, so I thought about it, just translate from Czech to English, and whatever wants to do with the text, just do whatever you want to do. I'm just translator, I'm not a director, so no, I didn't think about it at all.
I made some particular choices, like you were referencing, about wanting my teacher to be especially pompous and pedantic, and so I think my translation was maybe the least faithful in terms of a lot of particular words, like určitě ne. I did assuredly not, which is not quite as close as some of the others. So I didn't even realize myself how solidified that vision was, but I also would have been very comfortable with that being changed depending on the actor and how you wanted to portray it. Because at the end of the day, depending on how you're interacting with the director, but Edward is the director and the actors are the ones who have to say it. So you hand the text to them and that's that.
It's kind of a relay race. You're passing the baton to the next guy to get it across the finish line. Paul, any thoughts from your side on whether you're thinking ahead to the directorial and acting choices?
Sorry, I have to say that I have a very bad audio feed here, and when I'm sitting listening to what's going on in front of me, it seems like I'm listening to the whole thing is taking place in T-debate, because I'm not really understanding a lot of what's being said, and it's the fault of the audio feed.
So let me...
I don't want to sort of jump into the conversation out of context, but I should say just a couple of words about the play itself and how it originated. It was written in the mid 1960s, before the Prague Spring, but while the Prague Spring was still on the horizon. You could feel the changes coming, and Havel. The more I read the play, I've just reread it recently. It's really the languages that the artificial languages are a metaphor for the ideology, the official ideology, Marxism-Leninism, that went through a change in the 1960s, and so there were the old line communists and the reform communists who came with an apparently different way of dealing with their hegemony. And in the play, in the end, they dropped T-debate, but they replaced it with another artificial language, which is kind of like reform communism. And I think the Czech audiences at the time would really have gotten that. The ideology was imposed upon their lives, and it didn't make a lot of sense. It was scientific, but it was not necessarily human. And so the problem for a translator is how to translate the play and retain some of the context, but make it appeal to an audience or make it comprehensible to an audience that hasn't experienced this kind of totalitarianism. And that's a problem that I haven't really solved, but it's always there in the background. The context of the play as it was originally written and the context of the play as performed in translation are mostly different, and therefore you get different resonances and different reactions and responses. So in this particular play, in my translation of the play, I tried to translate it into kind of business speak, where the world of corporate world is full of the same kind of jargon as Marxism was, and it also demands a similar kind of loyalty. So anyway, that's just by the way. I hope I haven't sort of disrupted the context of the conversation, but as I said, it sounds like T-to-P to me.
Thank you, Paul. That's a great point. And it's exactly what I appreciate. I saw a production of the Memorandum in New York, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And they kind of updated the language. And I think we're going for exactly what Paul is talking about, sort of imposing, both the language and the manners of corporate America. And it worked really well. I felt like the play worked really well in that kind of an adaptation. And it was really cool. And I think the audience appreciated it. But I just realized it was a very different experience than what those Czech and Slovak audiences had in the mid-'60s, when there was this very specific political context that everyone in the audience could read. Other questions from our audience? I see one right in front, and I see one in back that I'll get to next.
Thanks. And thanks for a really entertaining and enlightening evening of theater. And this conversation's awesome. So, but I noticed a lot of parallels with the contemporary world, the climate we're living in now, with like the emojis, for example. That's like that's clearly a modern parallel. And like I thought of like pronouns and the proper use of pronouns and like z and zer and all that stuff, and like which is zig zip. Yeah, and so I'm wondering, in both translation and performance and directing, if there was any kind of reference or awareness of relating the stories of this play to a contemporary audience and contemporary times?
I definitely made my translation contemporaneous, but not that I could only do that because the scene was isolated, but it definitely makes it a lot easier because even my last line, I just included a joke about as per my previous email. Well, once you introduce email into this, then you almost have to include something if you're going to do the whole play that way. You have to include a line or do some workaround as to why he can't use the internet to translate the memorandum himself.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things, it's easier to get away with an isolated scene. So definitely, with particular words, even words like upgrade, for example, that has come into the modern lexicon mostly because of technology. But you would use that in certain contexts that Havel would never have used that in, right? So you have to be very aware of these things, especially when you're translating an entire play.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Or should we field the next question?
I'll say, I think it felt very contemporary, all of them, to me. Like, I did not struggle with relating to it. And I guess I'm kind of young, so I will say, I didn't even think that it didn't feel dated to me. And I think Edward had a brilliant emoji idea, and that even like solidified what I think was already there, which felt already like a very, like this could definitely happen today, these conversations, for sure.
But certainly we no longer have inappropriate relationships between faculty and students today.
Never.
Good, just clear that up. Yes, this question from the back.
I have to speak clearly because I'm an actor. I was one of the directors in Edward's wonderful festival, and I worked with Stepan Simek on the translation. And we were so lucky because he's not English as a first language, so the actors all contributed to that translation and told him little subtle things that weren't part of his growing up. That Americans might know, or native English speakers were. But I wanted also to mention that the composer is here of the music that was heard tonight. That's William here. But what I was really fascinated by was that all the different translations sort of had a Havel heart to them. And when you were working on it, did the script itself give you this feeling that I get from listening to them? Of the complexity of Havel, the humor, the heart, the warmth, and also the biting intelligence. If you have any comments.
Translators? Performers?
If you felt his energy in the language.
Definitely a little bit, and the thing we'd read sort of alongside this was Havel's prose, which is Byzantine in understanding, to say the least, and will vex any third-year Czech student. But it was very interesting to see him not just sort of be intelligent and be sort of this sort of blazing understander of the world, but also to just be really funny. And sort of trying to bring that across, I think, was really difficult and was something that definitely produced some uncertainty, but seeing the actors put it on made it sort of come alive again.
I often mention after Havel saw the memo, he said, I was worried it wouldn't feel funny to a New York audience, and now I realize the New York sense of humor is very similar to the Czech sense of humor. And to me also that extends to like the Jewish sense of humor, which I think informed the New York sense of humor, and the sort of underdog-ish, expect things to go wrong assumptions. So I think that did particularly translate. Oh, as Yolanda was saying, by the way, the composer who did a lot of music for 2006, William Niederkorn, is here, and we used his music again.
Anyone else like to jump in with one? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Since pedigree is supposed to be a more accurate language, wouldn't it need more bits and pixels for every document that you translate, whatever the English size was? A pedigree translation would be much larger.
Yes,
Well-
that would presumably be even harder to sell to publishers.
Yeah.
Right?
And in fact, that's the point that is brought up in the final of the 4 classroom scenes, in which they're announcing, they're sort of summarizing the failings of Petit Épée and introducing the new synthetic language, which is going to solve those problems. And they point out that indeed, a simple, like what should have been a very simple military communique, ran to 45 pages, and some other slightly more complicated instruction was a full volume. So that was very much a problem with the theory behind the language. Anyone else? My little questions. If any of the performers or translators want to come in with just either favorite bits or bits you really hated, either in the original or in the translation, things that were either a lot of fun to work with or you really wished you didn't have to work with.
Well, I have to say, for me, it was tedious to write when every time Carlos stands up and stands down. And I was like, oh my God, another stands up.
The stage instructions get pretty boring at that point.
As a translator, yeah, it was just the same. So yeah, but every time I write or translate, like, not screenplay, but plays, you just have to write the same names all over and over again. And when you have 2 names, you can just Control-C, Control-V, but when you have more names, you just have to write it every time, so that's boring to me.
Fair enough. Anyone else? Pet peeves or loves from this experience?
I kept getting tripped up on the fact that I wanted to use the yeah and the yeah, and I was trying to translate those as G's and Jesus, and because I think those interjections are very funny in English. So I'm not covering myself in intellectual glory here when I say that was my priority, but there's a joke that's very specific in the Czech and in the Petit Épée that's about Zik and it not being Zik, being Ziksim. So in the final draft, I had, I had something in English that actually went along with the structure of both the Czech and the Petit Épée.
So kicking and screaming, right? Alex.
Can I be that person who is asked to ask a question and instead makes a comment? Yeah. I hate to be that person, but I honestly don't have a question, but I was really struck tonight. I think that this whole performance shows really clearly why AI cannot do what humans do, because I hope that is one of the takeaways that people here have tonight, because there were multiple levels of translation going on here, right? First, the people who took the Czech translated it into English, then the actors and the director translated those words in their minds into actions, and then from their mind into their body, right? And a machine doesn't actually translate anything. It takes things that have already been translated a certain way and spits them out again the same way. You can't have creative translation from AI. And I think theater in a way shows this even more than prose, but I want people to understand that when you read a printed translation, you're actually also, reading somebody's interpretation of what was written in that first language, right? Like, they read it in their mind, They had the thought that this person was pompous or strict or whatever, and they translated it that way. So, I mean, at a certain point in my own translating career, I started to feel like the people who translate what people are saying live, those words, those people should be called translators, and the people who translate fiction and poetry, they're the ones who should be called interpreters. Because it's really the other way around. Like, there's much more interpretation involved in translating the printed word than the spoken word. I think, not to diss what interpreters do, I've done that too, but just, yeah, that was my thought watching all this tonight. And it was all incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex, for the professional's point of view. Anyone else have anything else? Well, I see one there.
How much, or not much, did the three of you translators interact as you were working on the material?
Good question.
We were basically completely sequestered from each other and sort of strictly forbidden from...
No cross-pollination of any kind.
Yeah. But we would walk out of class and we'd be like, how'd yours go? And we'd be like, bad.
And we weren't allowed to consult other translations either, so we didn't have access to Paul Wilson's translation, Vera Blackwell's, nobody's, which was a very intimidating place to start from.
Wow. How would you say you're on your own?
Yeah, I kept them in the dark. I thought that was part of the experiment. Yeah.
A quick question for our information is for the actors and the directors. How much time did you have to throw this together?
6 hours?
Yeah.
6 hours.
6 months to 2 years.
Yeah, right.
The actual on-site rehearsal time.
Last night, 3 hours. Today,
3 hours.
2.5.
Yeah.
Well, today was
Amazing.
the only on-site one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a good point to close with my. I want to close with my admiration for everyone who's up here. They did an incredible job. And extra thanks to Edward for being the impulse behind this, to get this going and to bring it all together.
Paul,
And
I think is saying...
we're going to get Paul back on, just a sec.
A new translating coming along, and the actors were great. We had a great time watching these various interpretations of these scenes. So it was. I want to congratulate them and thank them for all the work that they've done, and the work that you've done with them as well. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Paul. Thank you.